You're listening to Your Rivers Are Wrong, the podcast. My name is Merle. I'm here with my good friend Dante, and we're here to build worlds and tell their stories. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, or midnight, or twilight, whenever you may be.
Wow.
Welcome back to the Your Rivers Are Wrong podcast. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Dante.
And I'm the other one. My name is Merle.
And we're here, as we are every week, to talk about the wonderful whimsies of world building, the arts and aesthetics of setting up a setting and telling stories born from it.
Mm-hmm.
Episode 18, we're moving on forward.
18? Wow. That's a lot.
It is a lot, yeah.
This is like the thing where when you're like 16 and you really look up to people that are like 18 years of age, and then you are 18 and you're like, oh, it's just now. I guess I'm here now. And then it's just super like mundane. That's what this is.
I'm thinking we got to enjoy this now, because eventually we're going to be like, welcome to episode 76. And it's just like, doesn't have the same ring to it right now.
There's no impact.
Yeah. Our podcast is reaching adulthood. So I'm going to transition into a college, graduate, find a job eventually. In the coming weeks, they'll age and mature. Wonderful things like that. How you been? How's your week? What's life like across the pond?
Pretty good. I finished my holiday, so I went back to work this Monday. So that was a bit of an adjustment, but work is also nice. So it's I feel like you enjoy your holiday more when you know that it doesn't last forever.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
Right? Yeah.
I've gotten into the habit of taking like 2 days off, 3 days off.
Oh, yeah.
Because if your work week is like 2 days long, it doesn't really feel like a work week. It kind of feels like a break from your break,
Uh-huh.
And you save vacation days and you can spend them elsewhere for long trips and stuff like that.
That's super true.
Yeah.
And I feel like if your holiday is short, then you gotta like live it up. You gotta like be efficient in how much you enjoy each day, which is also nice. Because then you have a lot of good dates after each other because you only have so many. So that's pretty good. But now I'm back in the regular rhythm, which is also fine. And things are starting up again. And that's pretty good.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And we've had like some super summery days here. So like summer-like days. That's also a word.
Oh,
yeah. I was like, that's another word, which is super nice. So that was perfect timing.
For us, May's been kind of cold. I don't know.
Oh, really?
Maybe it's just, like the last couple of days have been very breezy, a little bit more rain than we're used to, but not bad. Not the worst. I think the allergies are really killing me. This year is brutal.
Oh,
Gosh.
Is it? Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, like I wake up with allergies and it's just like, I'm not even outside yet.
Oh, shit. That's awful.
Yeah.
I thought it was a thing where you like had to go outside and then it got like super worse and then you're inside and everything's fine. But now it's that bad that's not even relevant anymore.
Not really. I think it just hangs on your clothes and just gets everywhere.
Oh, maybe. Sucks.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spring. Don't we hate it?
Of course. Update on what we talked about last week, and hopefully I don't have to bring it up every day in the coming months. My plane ticket to Europe has officially been booked.
Yay!
So we got that in the works. In a couple of months, I'm going to be traveling to Europe for the first time, which is very exciting.
So good. I'm so stoked. It's going to be very fun.
Absolutely. And we're manifesting it right now, speaking it into existence. Yes. There is going to be one episode of this podcast recorded entirely in the Netherlands.
I mean, we have to. Like, we can't not do that when you're here,
that's a
when
given.
You're physically here.
Right. Imagine.
Yeah.
I was thinking the weekends that I'm there, if we play D&D, and am I just going to be like in another city in the Netherlands?
Oh, that's that might be. Hold on. Is that how that's going to work? That's going to be so confusing.
Listen, I got 2 weekends there. We might just, put it off for 2 weeks.
I mean,
food for thought.
If you have like energy to spare for like a 5-hour D&D session, because holidays are tiring.
See how it goes. Let me figure out how jet lag goes first and foremost.
Might
and then
be relevant.
Work it out. With that, I mean, we could just jump into our topics.
Sure.
As always, we start off with 2 topics. You bring one, I bring one. We don't know what each other's topics are, and we're delighted to figure out what they are. So I believe you're starting us off this week.
Sure.
Right?
That is, I have no idea, but apparently I am. Perfect.
Cool.
Actually, it's a good bridge, because talking about traveling, I brought the topic of today as the topic of like nomads and traveling around instead of like settling down somewhere, which I think is pretty interesting because it touches on a lot of things. Like it's both a cultural thing, but it's also a sort of practical thing. And maybe if we're talking about D&D anyway, like the sort of classic D&D adventure usually is a sort of nomadic traveling back and forth into different places, and you just stay in inns and taverns and hotels all the time. And there's not really like a thing of settling down at all. There's just sort of hopping from one place to another place, and there's, you know, wildly different games everywhere. But this is the sort of classic idea that I immediately get into my head when I think about the way that travel works in D&D, right? And I think that's maybe a good starting off point. There's a lot of connotations that are attached or linked to nomadic cultures, nomadic people. Of course, also in our own history, you know, like there's the Romani people or the Gypsies, Aboriginals, all stuff like that, that really at some point when industry, I guess, started to happen and cities started to form, they sort of fell between things, or some are still active. You know, there's a lot of talk about like the terrain that you can occupy or possess, maybe even. And at some point, you know, if you are a roaming people, that's not really relevant. But it can get you into trouble if other people claim their own space, you know?
Yeah, of course.
And then who's at fault there, right? This is a classic example. But I think there's a lot to this one. Maybe just share your first thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I think specifically for nomad, I think it's important to make distinct whether the nomad is an individual, if this is like a personal choice, whether it be like due to exile or due to curiosity, you know, traveling from place to place, or if this nomadic situation is more of a community, you know, traveling group of people. Is it like a family? Is it somebody who was dislocated, who was displaced from their...
Sounds bad.
Who were displaced from their home? Is this just how they survive, gathering food and supplies as they travel? You know, things like that. So I guess in the sphere of world building, we have to ask ourselves, so what is the purpose of nomading? Like, what is the goal trying to be achieved by the people who are going from place to place? Like, is it survival? Is it necessity? Or is it due to choice? You know, I know, obviously, we can always type into the tried and true avatar as people they're forced to go from place to place due to persecution, due to being chased down or hunted or looking for something in particular.
Yeah.
The air nomads in particular were sequestered into these secluded air temples far away from most civilizations so they could live like a life of peace away from the pressures of an advancing society. But if you're looking at like roving communities, you could look to like our own cultures. You could look towards the East Asian nomads who cross large expanses for food and supplies, like chasing herds of animals and stuff like that.
I find a very interesting aspect of this, the question related to whether it's in our nature or something, because it feels very logical that at some point mankind started to settle down, or at least that's how we got it in our, you know, primary school history books. You know, you have these different periods of time where you're like, okay, first it's foraging and hunting, and then people started to, you know, how do you say that? Like create or obtain game and like animals, cattle and stuff. And then they needed a place to stay, and then they built, and then more people came, and then cities, blah, blah, blah. You know, this sort of quote unquote natural timeline.
Right.
But there's a lot of cultures that I feel like didn't really follow that timeline, or were at least much later in, you know, when the settlements started to happen, or just weren't settling because other people drove them out. And I wonder how that relates to whether it's a logical choice to either settle or not settle.
I think the bottom line when it comes to nomadic communities is safety, right? Where you're stopping, where you're resting, is it safe? Is it sustainable? Is this somewhere you can live for a very long time? Or is there kind of a time limit or like an hourglass flipped before you have to move? And that could be like the creatures that live there. It could be the climate. It could be the weather. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know, actually. This is basically what I think I learned from school.
We can speculate.
But I can't confirm. That the development of agriculture was the reason that many people were able to stop traveling.
I think so.
The
Yeah,
fact
you
that they
become
could
more
generate their own food.
Right?
Yeah. They sustain their own crops, they grow their own food, they no longer need to hunt as much as they used to. And from that, if you're able to maintain these lands and stay safe, like you're not being attacked from other civilizations or tribes or things like that, you reach an era of peace, then that allows you to no longer be nomadic and kind of pursue a more settled down lifestyle, establish houses and buildings and all that sort.
Yeah, and I think from settling down, also a very big sense of hominess, or the fact that you create a home for yourself is a thing that, well, I mean, I guess the term or the idea of having a home or having a sort of thing to fall back on is also present in Roman cultures, of course, but it looks different. There's not like a physical place that you, in your brain, kind of link to the idea of safety and familiarity and stuff like that. And I think once houses or farms or stuff like that started to emerge or became the norm instead of the roaming around, then suddenly that's a physical thing. A home is then a physical thing that you have and that you have to protect and that other people can't, attack, because then you lose that.
Right.
And I think that's a very different approach to sort of living in a group or living in general, like living with people. Or the way that I think if you would attack a speculative roaming group of people or a roaming culture, they're fine. They're just going to go somewhere else and they'll be like, okay, cool. Well, I guess we're not welcome here anymore. Let's just go somewhere else and find another place to stay. But if you do that to like a literal city or like a small village or a farm or two that are in some place abandoned, you lose a lot of your like wealth because you attach that idea to the familiarity and stuff, and then they are not used to roaming or moving about. That's if it would be the same attack,
right,
the results and the mindset that you're talking about is super different, and I think that's so fascinating.
Right. Though I think the advantage that they have of a settled down community is that they have time and resources to set up defenses, right? To establish a sort of guard, to put up fence work and barricades and things like that. If you're attacking like a nomadic group, then obviously they always have the choice to pack up and leave. That's a given. But if you have a settled down community, then you have the advantage of, say, population. You have a lot of people there. You have these constructs that have been made specifically for protection. So while you do have much more to lose if you have an established community that is settled down, there are like small advantages for it. A lot of the earliest civilizations we have in our history established themselves towards positions of bounty, is what I'm looking for. So next to rivers, behind next to lush forests, behind mountains. Places that are not only relatively defensible from one point or another, but also quick to harvest, which is very convenient in, being able to settle down. So you kind of use your resources to your advantage. You try to plan your building and your construction around a place that can easily be protected, which is the goal. It's ensuring safety,
Yeah, there's like a whole different concept of like permanence to it. This is a bit of a tangent, but I was looking at a lot of like YouTube videos on like tiny house and like eco living and stuff. Me and my roommate would almost do a like house visit this week, but then eventually it didn't happen. So I got like super into the house searching mode for like 1 second. So then I ended up at all these like tiny ass videos, right? You see how my brain works.
Of course.
One of them was like, yeah, we really wanted to have like super pretty Moroccan tiles in our tiny bathroom, but then the thing would be like super heavy, so we wouldn't be able to move it. So eventually we just didn't. And I was like, oh, right. Like everything that you decide to be permanent shouldn't really be, because everything is like made for temporary use or for like flexibility. Like they talk about furniture having like at least 3 uses, otherwise it's not worth your time, right? And it's so fascinating to me. Like that's not at all how housing, what sort of the deal is when you want to have a house. You want to have a sort of I mean, classically, right? You want to have a sort of permanent place, right? Exactly what you're saying. Like you're looking at a place that will sustain you for a very long time. Like you need a place that you can protect so it can be sustained for a long time. And this whole idea of a like flexible, moving, non-permanent house is like super funny and interesting to me.
Yeah. To bring it like into the modern era, people who live out of these trailers, who like mobile cars.
Oh yeah, it's the same thing.
They have to very much consider what they have available in their ride and what they have to find like on the road. So that is parking spots, places that they're legally allowed to park, which could be like parking lots to supermarkets, or all the way out in the wilds. They have to plan for like where they can wash up. Not every car has a shower inside. Like they have like a shower head that they can attach to their car, and they have to refill that tank with water. Where they're finding food, where they're resting. There's a lot of like little things that you don't really consider when you actually live in like an apartment or a house or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Because like you said, you have to care about weight, you have to care about room, things like that. Like you have to make sure it's a sustainable place to just live as a human being, so you're not cramped or stuffed or anything like that.
Yeah, for sure, exactly. There's a lot to be said for like these alternative ways of living, and I think it's so fascinating to look at people that are actually doing it and have like all the hardships and the advantages of it. But I think maybe to tie it back a little bit to the D&D thing where we actually started, I wonder what it does to the mentality of a character or to a person that's living a nomadic lifestyle.
Right.
Aside from the fact that there's a different way of thinking about permanence or, temporariness, if you want to look at the other side of it. But just in a D&D party, like almost every D&D party or every, main characters of a book that it's every Avatar gang has this lifestyle in a way. And a lot of adventure books have. And I wonder if you thought about what that might do to a character's mentality.
I think one of the most interesting things about being forced to travel and go to different places is watching how every character handles it. There are, especially in D&D parties, there's always at least one player who is very used to this, living outside. They have their whole bag prepared for, finding a spot to rest, setting up a campfire, setting up a watch. They have their own bag and tent and all that. And there's always a character who's like very much out of their comfort zone, right? They still wear clothes that do not survive in the wilderness.
Yeah, deserted prince.
They're looking for their silver spoon and their utensils and stuff like that. So watching that dynamic of like, oh, you're totally a fish out of water. Let me like help you. Let me help you figure that out. And the development of the character in being more comfortable in situations where they feel entirely displaced, like that's an opportunity for growth, and that's an opportunity for conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Discussing it with other people. Like, you got to get over like, the classic spoiled rich kid in the forest is always fun to watch for the first couple episodes.
For sure.
Until they really get their bearings,
Yeah. I think it also allows for a lot of different kind of people interaction. If you are a roaming character, to stay to the, I guess, prince example, they're like super good in like one kind of social interaction, right? Which is like the posh or the, regal kind of interaction. But I guess if you're on the road, you have to deal with lots of different kinds of people and, ways of living, or people that have different opinions or values than you. And that might also change the way you care less or more about things that you otherwise would just take for granted, I think.
No, absolutely. It's one of the biggest boons of a traveling party, which is, the tried and true staple of a lot of these sort of fantasy stories, is it's an opportunity for the narrator or the storyteller to introduce their world, Like the whole map finally gets to be traversed. You get to see how culture has shaped itself.
That's very true,
in all these little pockets of the world. It's a fantastic way to introduce plot lines, locations, factions, like organizations, mythical landmarks, things like that. Giving the character an excuse to leave the comforts of their home and explore the world for all of its splendor is, just a staple to a proper adventure.
That's actually very true. For some reason, I did not think about that at all, even though it's so logical. Like, it's the sort of basic of how like roaming around works. But it's such a perfect way to sort of introduce your world and to allow world building to be naturally part of interaction and character building. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I think kind of to, I guess, put a cap on this topic, there is, I think, an innate wonder in all of us, to explore the world, to see everything that it offers, to kind of step away from, I don't want to say shackles. That's too strong.
The shackles of settlement.
The shackles of society, let yourself like be out of your comfort zone and truly like see how the world is much more expansive than what's right outside your door on your commute from your home to your work.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And in that, while nomadism is a real true thing that has existed for a very long time, it still, even today, carries this sort of mysticism and wonder and kind of a delight behind it when you get to see somebody constantly struggle against the elements, constantly achieve over the difficulties and trials of life to grow and mature as a person and see the world for what it is.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Like it's a fantastic eyes view for any reader, any storyteller, any player in any campaign, things like that.
Yeah, for sure. I really want to make a nomadic tribe now in my campaign. Maybe I just there's no argument to this. I just really want to make one now because we've been talking about it for 20 minutes.
Nothing's stopping you.
I really should. Yeah,
of course. Okay. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun.
I will put that on hold in my brain.
Cool.
Nice. Hey, what did you bring today?
Well, my topic for this week is relatively broad, but I do want to kind of narrow it down. Just touch on things that we've talked about before. I've been watching a lot of stuff lately, like whether it be movies or, D&D campaigns online or just episodic series. Something that's really kind of stuck out to me that is kind of a very strong point of contrast between everything I'm watching is the topic that I'm bringing today is technology, the level of technology specifically. I don't necessarily want to talk like ray guns and portals and futuristic cybernetic things, but kind of how a story is very much clarified, defined by its level of technology. I kind of want to focus in specifically today on fantasy settings because when we talk about world building storytelling, this is kind of the natural conclusion.
Yeah.
I watched, for people who know me, I'm a huge fan of Dimension 20, which is a podcast of comedians and improv actors from the College Humor community. There are 2 campaigns that they're running or have run already that I've watched to completion at this point. As of the time of this, when this releases, I'll have watched both of them into completion. Yeah. Finale releases literally tomorrow. But first series is Crown of Candy, which is kind of a medieval Game of Thrones style story that is colored and flavored like every character is a piece of candy or chocolate or kind of food or anything.
Beautiful.
Like that.
Love that premise.
And the other series is Starstruck Odyssey, which is based on a spacefaring, ship riding, galaxy traveling group of mercenaries, I suppose.
Sure.
And what I'm realizing, the thing that separates them so much, even though the actors or players are exactly the same, is their level of technology. And that drives home a very specific thing that is what people in the story can or can't do. I think that's kind of the core concept I want to tackle here.
Okay, yeah.
So when you think of technology and fantasy, I'm going to toss something to you. When you think of technology and fantasy, what's the first thing that comes to mind? What is classified as technology to you?
I mean, that's an interesting question in general, because I immediately was like, the book press was technology once, and now it's just how we make physical books, right? But the first thing that came to mind was more of the trope, I guess, if you would call it that, of ancient technology hidden in the land, more as a sort of ruin that the natural world is built upon, or something that is hidden in the history of the planet or Earth or whatever. But that's quite literal, I feel. I feel the other thing that I just said is a more interesting question or maybe a more interesting thing to develop or talk about within your fantasy setting. Because the ancient technology, while I love the trope, by the way, it's a very satisfying thing to watch. But it feels like it's separate from daily life, right? It's sort of this alien thing that gets discovered. It's a thing that has passed, basically. And the remnants of it are visible now. It's like you're doing history work or, I don't know, archaeology. And modern day technology, or whether cell phones exist, or whether there's cool ziplines in your city. I don't know. That's
cool ziplines.
I love ziplines. I always love ziplines in every city.
2 necessities to highly advanced culture. Cell phones and ziplines.
There we go. End of argument.
We should just title this podcast Cell phones and ziplines.
Yeah, I would be pro. Yeah.
It fits the brand.
but those have direct impact on the way your characters move and behave, the way a city structure works, all that sort of relevant stuff that's part of daily behavior and daily life and the way that you traverse and move and communicate and all that sweet stuff.
Right.
The ancient thing is more a history class on the history of the world, I guess, which is cool, but in a different way. And I think the other thing is the more fascinating thing to develop and maybe implement in your world, to me.
Yeah. So I really want to focus on two things you said there.
Okay.
Communication and transportation. So let me take those two campaigns I just talked about into perspective. For communication, right? Communicating over long distances in Crown of Candy, impossible, right? You send a courier, you send like a message by Raven or something like that, right? It takes a couple of days, a couple of weeks. Information
travels. By the way, quick question,
like
the Crown of Candy thing is basically the Game of Thrones style world, right?
Yes.
Sort of classic
medieval fantasy.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Right. So it takes days or weeks to send a message. So secrets are kept much longer, you know?
Yeah.
They're trying to organize large factions takes a good amount of time. So you have that small window. Whereas in Star Trek Odyssey, Spacefaring Galaxyland, people have cell phones. They have email. They have like news reports over TVs and projections across planets.
Right.
Right. There's one character who has almost no combat capabilities at all, but so in almost every fight, they're on their cell phone. They're communicating with like factions and organizations across ways. They're hacking into computers.
I love that. That's great.
They're making deals mid-fight so that the opposition sways one way or another. Like the conversation is so quick and so easy to organize that you can make moves from the vast vacuum of space without anyone being next to you.
Wow. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, and on that, like transportation as well, right? In Crown of Candy, it's horseback, it's carriage, it's marching by troops, by water or milk in this series. It takes a long time to travel somewhere, and thus story takes place in this interim. In these days to weeks where you're riding this vehicle, you have conversations, you have the perils of travel, bandits or obstacles, things like that. In Star Trek Odyssey, they have faster than light. They can move at light speed from one galaxy to the next. It's instant or almost instant, to the point that a conversation as long as maybe a minute, 10 minutes is all you need to jump millions upon millions of miles. So it's not about the travel anymore as much as it is the destinations you can reach, which is vast and plentiful and incredibly detailed, because that's where the story has to take place. Now the travel has been eliminated due to the advancements of technology. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And it immediately triggers my DM stress brain where I'm like, wait, but if there's no travel, then you have to like be instantly ready for any place that they want to visit like within 1 second. And you don't have like a week to be like, okay, it takes a bit of time. Guess I'll see you next week. Okay. That terrifies me, but it's very cool. I don't know if I would be able to do it.
And that's exactly like what I want to lean into.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of reasons why D&D rests easily into medieval fantasy is not just because of preference, but because it's easy to run. If you don't have to worry about cell phones, you don't have to worry about cars, you don't have to worry often about guns.
Yeah.
There is a complexity that is entirely removed from the equation, and you can kind of narrow it down and say like, well, it's going to take you a week to get from this town to the next. What do you want to do in the meanwhile? And like, I guess we'll just like read or travel together or like kill some things on the road. It simplifies the scope of what the characters can achieve. And that's, like, again, another point I want to bring up. Technology directly affects the capabilities of ordinary people. I think that's kind of the cornerstone of the conversation here. What you are able to do, barring any sort of magic or things like that, is directly related to how much technology is at your disposal. Otherwise, you're limited to, human potential and human limits and things like that. But introducing things like cell phones, guns, cars, planes, things like that allow people to do much greater things than they'd normally be able to do, expanding the scope of possibility, which makes the story details or levels more complex should you choose to introduce it into your setting.
Yeah. I really love that idea. And also, I think it's interesting in general as sort of the world builder or the one that makes the decision whether or not you want to, implement cell phones or lightspeed travel or any of that stuff. I think the interesting question also lies in whether or not you want your characters to be part of the development or if they just want to live in the development.
Right.
There's a difference between the fact that lightspeed travel is just there and nobody knows how it works, but it's just there. I don't know how my microwave works, but I just use it all the time, right? That kind of idea. Versus the other idea where you're like, let's say in The Legend of Korra, where Asami, spoilers, I guess, Asami's dad has like, I guess, a sort of technology company where he builds the first cars and has like a sort of electric glove kind of weapon that never existed before. And it spirals this whole world into a new era of technological developments and gives, as you were saying, like capabilities to quote unquote regular people that are not able to bend or have like the sort of natural elemental powers. But whether or not somebody can use that glove, or whether or not they're part of the development or the intrigue or the spectacle of the whole storyline with Asami's dad, can or cannot have influence on your character. And both are interesting ways to go, because the casualness of something that's actually really cool, like lightspeed travel, and then just use it casually as if you've been living this lifestyle all your life, is a very cool thing. But also, if you're part of that development, or if you're one of the pioneering people, is a whole different kind of cool. And they're both super fascinating. And I think that's pretty nice. And the second thing it reminded me of is a video that I saw a while ago from Ariel Bassett. She's one of my favorite YouTubers, but in the past, she used to be very book related. So she was a booktuber. And she once made a video where she sort of shared her frustration about the fact that in books, cell phones are very not present at all in general.
Yes.
It's maybe different now. This video is, I guess, a good few years old, so it might be different now. But that was really, even though we had phones and internet and, you know, all that stuff, email, it was never there in books somehow, because it's just a hard thing to deal with as a writer, but also because if it's not there, and this is what her frustration was about, she was like, if you don't represent this, then this is not relatable to us if it's a modern story. And also, there's this whole idea of, oh, if I implement technology in this, I sort of date my story. If I have cell phones that are like, what's that called in English? Like the sort of snapping cell phones that you have to sort of open up, right? The old ones. Flip phones, yeah, there we go. If you use flip phones in your story, everybody knows this is like 2000s, or I don't know, 2005 that this story takes place in. If you want it to have a sort of broad appeal, there was this idea that you shouldn't really do that because then it dates your story. And she was like, no, I love that because I love aesthetics that have a certain time period. I also love reading about like 1800s Victorian whatever. And I'm not bothered by the fact that they all wear dresses and I never wear a dress in my life. So that's also maybe a little bit of a side note, but something to think about if you're writing things that you want to relate to or that you want to sort of pull out of our life as well. And it also depends how you put that in your story, whether or not it is relatable or whether you want to date your story or not.
Yeah, I think for me, when I watched Starstruck Odyssey, it was one of my first insights into what it looks like to run a futuristic campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are a lot of things you have to consider that are now available for people to do. Like so many rom-coms are based on the foundation of misunderstanding, you know?
That's so
like
true.
You're not able to properly communicate. Yeah. And boy, is that like the most frustrating thing for me. I'm like,
it's so frustrating, right?
They just talked
There's
about it.
There's this one issue. Yeah. And then the whole movie's based about it. And I was like, if you just had walked in like 1 second earlier, this whole issue wouldn't exist. And I could do something else with this time that I'm watching this movie.
Yeah, so when you're factoring in the level of communication people have, right, that's very, very important.
Right.
And I totally understand if you try to make a setting that's like halfway through the technology we have now and like the no technology era, you are correlating your fictional story to a real point in time. And if you do it incorrectly or don't match up what technology is available at a certain era, then it leads to like an anachronistic situation. You know, things seem out of place or out of time and disconnect from how real the story feels.
Sure.
You know, which is very hard to do. And that's why I only do medieval fantasy because it's so easy when nobody has cars or phones.
I was gonna ask actually, like, are there certain things from this sci-fi campaign or like the technology campaign that you were like, even though it's hard, I do really love the way this works and I would never be able to do it in my medieval fantasy?
Yes. So, yeah, absolutely. There is, and this is going to be a pretty short tangent, I hope. but you never know, really. One of the prevailing things or ideas or motifs of Star Trek Odyssey is that the world is chaos. If you live in space, there's an ever-expanding, limitless number of places you can be.
Okay.
Possibilities are truly infinite. You're not limited by water. You're not limited by walls or mountains. You can go anywhere, right? And that's a little bit intimidating as someone who's a storyteller, but at the same time, it's also liberating because you realize that when you have all of this space, your players can no longer rely on it being predictable or safe. There is inherent dangers to traveling very, very far into the unknown. And the DM is no longer kind of responsible for coddling the players and being like, okay, well, this is too much. Don't go here kind of thing. Yeah. It's at their own risk. They're going that far. So there's kind of a collective collaborative onus to be very, very careful where you go. And also that in a truly limitless setting, anything is possible. There's like you can come up with anything you want and it could probably exist because it's infinite. It's an expansive thing.
That's very true.
Yeah. While also very daunting, it's very freeing. There's kind of a balance there and it's just done so well. To the merit of the Dungeon Master, Brendan Lee Mulligan, he's really, really smart and very, very creative. And
so cool.
What he's done is not something that anyone can do easily, but it's proof that it can't be done. So.
Yeah, I love that.
And I guess hopefully the final tangent that I wanted to do here, which touched on what you discussed before, specifically in Legend of Korra, is kind of the crossover, like ley line connection of technology and magic, right? So bending is basically the equivalent to magic. Only some people can do it. It's an extraordinary power and kind of elevates certain people higher than others in the fantasy setting that it exists in. So when you suddenly give ordinary people access to technology and allow them to reach the same steps or same abilities as magical people, you see that sort of shift in dynamic. One of the hugest motifs or themes in Korra is the underlying conflict between benders and non-benders. Like who deserves to be an authority, who deserves to be at the top, and kind of realizing that all people are equal when given equal opportunity, or regardless of when they're given equal opportunity, all people should be equal, which is a fantastic dynamic that plays up in fantasy settings when the people who have sending no longer need to have sending when they can use cell phones. Right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
And people who can like run really fast are no longer super powerful because people have cars now. As you said, like ancient artifacts, as people catch up to magic with technology, that meeting point is always so interesting to read or just listen to.
Yeah, for sure. And even to bring it maybe further, I also was thinking as you were talking, what is even magic in general? A lot of the times magic is represented in a sort of wizard school type of way. Not always, but there's a lot of wizard schools out there in which, you have to read books and you have to understand the physics of magic. You have to sort of get it in your muscle memory. This is like a very realistic kind of depiction of learning a skill or a craft of sorts. And in our world, I guess technology or, understanding physics or chemistry is not super different from that. So I wonder, like, why do we call the one thing magic and the other thing technology? And even in Korra, like, imagine if we would just call the sort of electric glove kind of thing. What if we would just call that electric magic or just also magic, one of the avant-garde type of bendings? What's the difference, really? So I think that's also a very nice question to ask yourself every now and then, if you're sort of pick and choosing this balance of technology and magic in a world building setting that you're making.
I think there's constantly the line of magic where magic is what cannot be contained or explained, right? There's like a
mysticism
little
kind of aspect to it.
The mysticism behind it, right? And harnessing it is a form of technology, as we've seen in like series like Arcane.
Oh yeah,
where they tried to contain this limitless magic into a small hex core, and like the dangers of doing something like that.
Yeah.
The crossover of magic and technology, always so interesting.
Yeah, and also when it corrupts, then suddenly it becomes this mystical thing because you don't understand how it works anymore, or it works against the way that you're used to it working.
Yeah, exactly.
Really nice. Yeah.
A topic that reaches and teaches and can probably be done a couple of times. This is just one of many.
Can be put on the revisit list, yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh. If you'd like to learn more, you can look at our podcast episodes, Magic and Corruption,
Yep.
and How to Build a Setting. I think that's episode 2. Yeah, we're building like a little thesaurus here. Not a thesaurus, like a dictionary of encyclopedia.
We have like a good archive going on. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's looking real good.
I love that we can reference our own episodes now. That's like next level.
If you look at episode 12, I mean, we talked about this.
Perfect.
I love that. All right. Guess we're going on to our final thing, which is a prompt, I believe.
Yes, that's true. I have a very random one today. I will do the prompt this week, I believe. This is very much not my own idea. I recently, for no reason at all, had to think of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl.
Yes, okay.
I don't know what triggered this, but I had like a super specific memory about that scene where Charlie spends money to buy a chocolate bar to hopefully find a ticket, and he doesn't find one. And then there's this beautiful paragraph or like chapter or something where just Roald Dahl is describing how this golden ticket craze is going on in the world. And he's like, everybody bought up chocolate, and there was this one woman in Russia who claimed that she found the last one, but then it turned out to be a fake, and then she got canceled, basically. And all this craziness in the world was sort of described by Roald Dahl in sort of explaining how much people wanted to find this. I think it was also the last one of the 5 of the 5 golden tickets. So inspired by that random scene that popped up in my brain, why don't we try to make or design a product that the world will go crazy about? And I'm curious what that is. It can be anything.
Yeah. Before we go into that tangent, Willy Wonka definitely chose who got those tickets. Let's be real here. 5 tickets spread all across the world, and 4 of them are found in London. Impossible.
Oh,
impossible.
Okay.
Impossible.
Do you have theories on this? Like, are you accusing?
No, I don't want to go into it.
You brought this up, Mr.
It was planned. Absolutely planned. Anyway, things that the world will go crazy over, like our current era, like today, 2022.
Sure.
Our Lord 2022.
Or if you prefer another time, that's also fine.
No, this is fine.
I just want a sought after product.
What do people want? I mean, are we thinking like things that have already been thought up of, or are we trying to just go straight like off the wall, something truly
I just want the world wild to go into craziness for this one product that no one ever would think would become so popular. Maybe because it's rare, or because it's like super tasty, or because it's I don't know. Go crazy.
Now I'm thinking of Willy Wonka stuff. What is Everlasting Gobstopper would be so good.
Oh, what's that one again? Is this like the chewing gum? No,
it's a bank. Yeah, it's a banquet in a chewing gum.
Oh yeah, right.
You eat a whole meal from
chewing
gum. Oh gosh, are we thinking like convenience or fun? Because I think that's the like something that improves our lives, or something that is just entertaining.
I like it when it's like super useless.
Super useless.
I have to think of like the fidget spinner rage suddenly. Like that was one of the things.
Oh gosh. Okay. So we're thinking like like Rubik's cubes and stuff like that. Like just really silly things. Oh gosh. Okay. So let's just start laying groundwork so we can build up what we want this to be. Just like random ideas. Okay. For me, there's got to be some sort of light, some lights involved. I think some lights like really entertaining, like flashy,
like disco ball
dramatic
vibes.
Yeah. For me, I think that's something that would be wild. This is just kind of spitballing, and it doesn't have to be the final concept, but like these things that you wear, or like even worse, like implant. That might have people might be too crazy.
Getting back into the sci-fi vibe. Yeah. I like it.
Put it into your ears.
Okay.
You play a song.
Yeah.
And your body lights up depending on like what it plays.
Whoa.
Like you see like in your arms, on your legs, along your face, there's like graphics, like things that appear.
Ooh, that's fucking wild. Okay. I love that. That's instantly also a status symbol then. If you listen to a specific type of music, then you will look a certain way.
And I think,
So if you listen to, I don't know, John Mayer and your arm turns red, then everyone with a red arm will be like, haha, see what you did there. Love your vibe, right?
Yeah. And I'm thinking like we do this like tattoo style, right? That you can even like just play something persistently, very softly, and you have this kind of shifting tattoo that exists on your skin.
Okay.
And you can like just wear it through daily life. It doesn't have to be actually doesn't have to be attached to music. Screw it. It could just be like a tattoo that you can shape to look like whatever you want. And you see like all these celebrities with very dramatic tattoos, like they're highly committed to the aesthetic.
Sure.
And they there's like a shimmer to them, a shine, a movement,
So is there a lighting up element then if it's not connected to music? Or is it just sort of perpetually lighting up?
I think you can inject like glowiness to it. God. Like you can there's like a luminescence you can add to it. And you can even if you wave your hands, things will appear in the air as an after image when you do it.
Ooh, that's cool. Kind of like the firework thing that where you can write in the sky. Yeah. Okay, I like that. Yeah.
And obviously this is so we need widespread appeal, right? We need this to be popular to everybody. Yeah. So no injections, nothing implanted.
Nothing that people might hate.
Nothing that people will attribute to the CIA. I'm thinking it may be like a wristwatch or a bracelet, something very unintrusive, right? Once you wear it, there's like an echo that pulses across your body and it like looks very, very cool. And you can kind of program it. It's like a smartwatch, right? You go onto your computer, type up what kind of tattoo you want, and suddenly it appears on your body.
Okay. This is probably like a pretty expensive thing because it's like fancy and nobody has seen this before, I guess. So this feels like there would be like...
So it's a symbol of wealth.
Yeah. For sure. That's one side. And then the other side is that because it's a symbol of wealth and not everyone is wealthy in the world, there will be like so many knockoffs. And maybe one knockoff gets particularly good, which is like why people are super, seeking the actual OG one, the original product.
Oh, so you can hijack it and like turn it into something interesting? Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, that's also interesting. No, I was saying like if this would be like a smartwatch kind of thing. An Apple-made smartwatch. And Apple is super rare and expensive, and barely anyone has the real one. The demand would be so big. There would be like a shit ton of knockoffs on the market that are like looking like it, kind of work like it, but then die after 2 months. I don't know.
Malfunction.
Yeah, exactly. They're just sort of the shittier brother of this product. And because there's so many, and because the demand gets so big, and maybe the knockoffs get really good at it, people buy them all the time. They have a lot of, investors' money. I don't know.
Right.
The real one or the original one is getting even higher in value and, that people want it.
Now, here's an interesting idea from I used to be involved in a modding community for a video game.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes to pull off like a hack or a mod, you need the older or oldest edition of a hardware product because it's the most exploitable or the most like easy to boot into and like change.
Yeah. So the security is least good.
Yeah. Like as this becomes more popular, obviously they tighten up security and stuff like that because the people who develop it have that proprietary ownership.
Right.
But if you get a really, really old version, it's easier to hack and you can get all the really, really cool things that people have developed that are not possible with the official versions, So there's kind of a contraband aspect to it. There's kind of
there's an underground modding community to this one.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Right. And I think that could be super sick. And it's a way to express creativity. Like if you're a designer, you can design very specific tattoos that look a very certain way. Like, that's gotta be like a Castana design, or that's gotta be like a Medvedi kind of aesthetic. It's
not just the product, but this is like a designer tool now where people can just buy Dolce & Gabbana tattoos and be like super fancy about it and own the design, which is a whole different situation because then we get like into what open source is, if that's still a thing, or if we just are like hijacking code now, if that's the underground scene we're talking about.
Like imagine this in like high schools, right? Kids would go crazy over this sort of thing.
For sure.
Where they could wear their own design, just like twist of a watch, and just something just flashes over them. And like schools would have to decide what kind of designs are okay for school and what aren't.
Oh, I love that. Oh, now they have to like
during like football games, everybody distributes like a QR code and everybody wears the same tattoo like immediately. How sick would
for sure. This is definitely like the sneakers that you have with like the lights in them, and then you have to like stamp the ground and then they light up. Do you know these ones?
This is a couple levels above light up sneakers.
This is like next level light up sneaker shit. Yeah.
That's true. This is like Heelys to the max. That sounds sick. I'm going with that.
Interesting.
Let's do that.
I like it.
Right.
This is very specific already. I'm very fond of
I think there's a difference in mindset in utility versus like virality, like how popular this thing is not necessarily based on how useful it is, but how accessible, and how people can express themselves through it.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely the products that are most fun to go viral are the most useless ones. Because then you're like, why is this a thing? Oh, I guess everybody loves it. Okay, then. Guess we're going with this for no reason in particular.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, now that we've concluded a podcast with a quick lesson on capitalism.
Yep, that's what we're here for. Tune in to get your daily capitalism dose.
Listen, even economy and all this stuff that we're talking about is still relevant to world building and storytelling, which is the focus of our podcast. Yeah, so, I mean, we're on brand. Still on brand. Yeah. Thank you guys for tuning in to this episode. This is, again, a fun one. I hope you're stepping away with this with a little more insight or knowledge or inspiration to build your own worlds and tell your own stories.
Yeah, build your own light up sneakers, kids.
Of course, yes, absolutely. But of course, as we always say, remember, your rivers are wrong.
Yeah, they're pretty wrong. They're still wrong.
Still wrong. Have a good one.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Your Rivers Are Wrong. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future episodes that you'd like to hear us cover, feel free to contact us at yourriversarewrong@gmail.com. Our intro and outro music is written by Maarten Schellekens. Thanks for that. And again, thank you so much for listening. We hope to see you at the next one.